to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hey, welcome to WTF on A Well-Designed Business. It's Window Treatment Friday. I am joined by my friend and co-host Vita, the CEO and founder of Vitalia Inc., your workroom and your window treatment partner in the Philadelphia metro area. Hi, Vita. How are you today?
I'm great, LuAnn. Thank you so much, and thanks for that intro.
Well, I'm happy to spread the love about you and your company, because since we have been doing this podcast together, now I've had the opportunity to work with you, and you are a class act lady, so thank you for what you do. Yes.
Anytime.
Now, before we get to today's topic, Vita, which is your window treatment services, which business model is best for you, which I know is going to be very important to interior designers. And why do I know this, Vita? I know this because since we've started Window Treatment Friday, designers have been emailing us and you have been taking the lead and having conversations with them about the topics that are most important to them. And this is one of them at the top of the list. So we cleared our decks, we changed our schedule, we did new recordings, and we're answering the need, right?
I mean, talk about being flexible and agile in this ever-changing world.
Exactly.
Nothing to be said about the two other episodes that we have in the bank, so to speak. But the feedback from the first two has been so great, and answering those emails and DMs has been so rewarding that it just didn't make sense to not address some of the more pressing topics that are on our listeners' minds.
Exactly. So we're going to take this apart. And before we do that, I have a special announcement and a reminder announcement. So first, I want to give you a reminder that Vita and I will be presenting Demystifying Window Treatments for Interior Designers at the Design Trade Resources Showroom in Devon, PA. This is on September 24th at 12 o'clock p.m. It's a free event, which is graciously sponsored by Stout Fabrics. And to RSVP to this event, go to events@designtraderesources.com. So we're hoping to see you there. It's a great chance to meet both of us and to find out about all these burning questions that you have about window treatments, okay? Now, the second thing that I want to say is that on September 23rd, the day before that, WindowWorks, my WindowWorks showroom in Livingston, New Jersey, is reigniting and kicking off our lunch and learns for the season. We were closed all last spring and winter because WindowWorks was renovating, and now we are ready and open to the public. And so our first lunch and learn is going to be on September 23rd. Now, I want you just hold on to your seats while I tell you what we're doing for our first lunch and learn to kick it off. I'm so excited. I can't even stand it. So first of all, if you are a member of IDS, Interior Design Society, then you fully know about the Swatched chapter meetings that the IDS has had. I had the privilege of attending a Swatched event in Palm Springs at their national conference last May. This Swatched event is so loved by designers, and it is the coolest thing under the planet. And so here's the thing. I'm twisting this idea that IDS hatched, this Swatch event, and I am twisting it for our Lunch and Learn. And here's the spin on it. Wait till you hear this, Vita. So Kimberly and I have been for the last 6 weeks saying we have to get the draperies ordered for the showroom. We have to get the window treatments ordered. We have to pick the fabrics. And of course, we're both a little ADD when it comes to picking the fabrics for our showroom because it's much like decorating a room. We want to start with the anchor piece, whatever it is. In a design scheme, it could be the sofa, it could be the art, it could be the rug, it could be anything. But for us, it's the feature window treatment. It's the back wall, okay? And so we struggled with finding this exact fabric. Finally, we found it. It was like, that's it. It's done. Now the rest of the showroom has to do two things. I feel very strongly to this, and I've done every showroom for 37 years in this regard, that everything works off of that initial focus fabric. However, I don't want my whole showroom to be, say, 3 colors. So, for instance, this focus fabric is a beige, a fuchsia pink, and different tones of other shades of pink and some minor accent colors. So my thing is I want the samples in that showroom to run off of that. So we're going to keep the pink in, but we're going to introduce a different color. And then when we introduce that second color, the next treatment has stronger in that color, you see? So it's like, it's almost like an ombre effect of the color palette is the way Kim and I have always designed the showroom. And so we've been struggling with this. And because we love this fuchsia primary print so well, but we're not finding the things that bounce off of it. And the clock is ticking, Vita, and we want to have the showroom opening. And finally, I said, oh, my goodness, we're going to do a version of Swatched with the interior designers in the area. So it's called Showroom Showdown. Okay? Ooh. And what we're going to do is we're going to have on hand tons and tons of memo samples of fabrics. The designers that attend, we're going to divide them up into groups. They're going to have access to all of the fabrics, and each one is going to make a mood board of what every treatment in the showroom should be. And then we're going to pick the winner and design the showroom off of their mood board.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that awesome? Don't you love that idea?
I have so many questions. My head is spinning. I don't know where to begin.
I can't even stand it. I can't even stand it. I'm so excited. So that's what they do at IDS for Swatch. What they do is they have all these samples available. They have paint swatches. They have fabric swatches. They have cut sheets from different showrooms, whether it's Kravic, Curated Kravic, Century, whoever it would be, Stout, whatever it would be, right? And what happens is they say to the designers, they divide the designers up into different tables. They make teams out of them, and they say, your client is a, baby boomer client that has an outdoor space that they want to have, living for multi-generations and, yada, 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 design the outdoor space. And so they all separate into groups and they create a mood board, and somebody thinks there should be a pool, and somebody thinks there should be a fire pit, and somebody thinks there should be outdoor lighting. And they create all of this stuff. And so we're going to have them create the showroom. And then check this out. I'm like so excited. So then, instead of like we usually do, we install a window treatment here, we install a window treatment there, we're going to keep them, we're going to order them all, we're going to keep them back for a reveal party, and we're going to have a holiday reveal party with all the designers.
Oh, how fun!
Oh my God.
How exciting.
I can't even stand
what a great idea.
So
I may have to borrow it for my new space that's not decorated at all yet. I may have to steal it. Borrow.
I borrowed and stole the idea from IDS, so you may as well borrow it too. I mean, I just love it. I just absolutely love it. And the truth is, I'm not surprised that an idea came like this out of IDS, because the IDS group of people, Vita, is just so fun and so warm. And anybody that is interested in joining IDS should go to interiordesignsociety.org. Is it .org or .com? You see, there you go. That's LuAnnisms right there for you, okay? But you can find it. Google IDS, right? And they have a virtual chapter and everything else. But I am co-opting their idea. I've already called them and told them, so they love it. They're fine.
You know what's so great about you? It's like you have this amazing ability to spread the love. I mean, how exciting that you promote other organizations and you promote other business coaches and you promote other designers, and it's just so prevalent with you. LuAnn, it's not just like one-off instance here or there. I mean, you do it on every show, at every in-person appearance at every presentation. I mean, it is quite incredible.
Well, I want everybody at the party. That's all it is. I want all my good peeps at the party. So, but I am so excited about this. So we are going to be, probably by the time this show airs, we'll have sent email invitations out. We'll have created an Eventbrite link for it and all of that stuff. But if you are in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area and you want to be part of Showroom Showdown, you've got to put it on your calendar for September 23rd, okay?
That sounds exciting. And by the way, I just looked it up, and it is interiordesignsociety.org.
Thank you.
Completely spelled out. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you.
All
Thank
good.
you. That's LuAnn. 3/4 of the details ready.
Hey, happy to help. That's what makes us a great team.
That's it. Oh, man. So, Vida, the other part that makes us a great team is that you really create great outlines for our topics, and I appreciate that so much. So today we're going to be talking about your window treatment services, which business model is best for you, okay? So tell us a little bit about it. Set it up for us, Vida, and then we're going to pull it apart.
Okay. So the topic, like LuAnn said, is your interior design services, and specifically which business model is right for you. The way we are looking at it is that in the last 2 episodes, hopefully, we have convinced you that custom window treatments should be included as part of your offerings, but we don't want to just leave you high and dry and hanging there, because I'm thinking that your next questions are like, well, how the heck to do it? How am I going to put it all together? Where do I even begin? How does it all come together? And specifically, if we were to put these questions in business terms, it is, which business model do I pursue? And so in this episode, what LuAnn and I are hoping to do is to outline the framework for one of the business models so that you can decide if this particular model is right for you. And in the next episode, we'll tackle a different business model. And then at that point, you can decide if that one is right for you.
Right. Okay. I love it. So in business model number 1, which we're covering today, we're kind of calling it do-it-yourself model. This is where an interior designer is going to take full ownership of the window treatment services that he or she is offering to their client. And by full ownership, we mean full ownership, right?
Let's repeat that again.
Full
responsibility,
ownership.
full accountability. They own the wins, they own the losses, the great results, the sometimes mistakes, everything, the full package, the whole enchilada.
Right. So what's the one of the first things that you need to consider if you are going to take full ownership of the window treatment model in your business is that you're going to do your own measurements. And so, Vida, this could mean that the designer takes the measurements themselves, but it also could mean that they work with a specific installer. But the idea is that the installer is an independent, it is not an installer provided by a workroom or a concierge window treatment retailer like WindowWorks is, or a workroom like yours is. It's all in your house. Now, you don't necessarily, it doesn't mean that the installer is on your payroll, but like your tile guy is your tile guy, your painter is your painter. This is a window treatment installer who has his own business, who is you are hiring out to do, or you have learned to measure on your own, right, Vida?
And that's a really important aspect right there. You have learned to measure on your own. Interestingly, when I was looking back at 14 or so years ago, when I was first starting in this business and when I was getting certified, there was a whole course and then like a field trip and then a test on how to measure. Like, believe it or not, even just to hold the tape correctly, to extend it properly, to know how to do inside mount measurements. Those inside measurements, do you measure to the 16th? Do you measure to the 8th? And sometimes you look at the same number and two different people kind of see it differently.
Right.
So measurements are not to be overlooked, of course, and I'm sure I'm saying something pretty obvious and everybody knows that those are key. But if you decide to run a do-it-yourself kind of model, then that's probably a first step. Learn how to measure inside mounts, outside mounts. Learn how to look at a blank window and all the obstructions around the window, or all the different components of the house around that space and around the window, and know how to measure for those, and then ultimately how they would impact the design and the execution of your design.
Right. So, and the thing, where did you learn to do that? Is that certification still available?
So my particular one probably is not. I started as a franchise. It was called V2K Window Decor. I stayed with them for, I believe, a year or so, but I went through their schooling and the certification program, and they spent considerable amount of time teaching us how to measure.
So my guess is that for, a resource on possibly finding someone who does do courses on certification window treatments and or just teaching how to measure, I would look into the WCAA.org, which is the Window Covering Association of America, or I would definitely, you should be anyway, getting your free to the trade subscription for the Window Fashion Vision magazine, because that would have any information there. And of course, you can get your free subscription to that by being, if you have to be in the trade, but you can go to subnow.com/LuAnn, SUBNOW /LuAnn. So I just wanted to put those two in there because, yes, okay, it's one thing to say that we have to learn how to measure. It's another thing to show them where and how to do that, right? Okay, so and to your point in measuring, when we teach our salespeople to measure, what we do constantly is we will do measures all around the showroom, right? We'll be, okay, let's measure this window. And to your point, we will say, okay, we're both looking at this measurement. What measurement do you see? And, there takes a little bit of time until the person you're teaching sees the same measurement that you see. So it's 52 and a 16th, it's 52 and an eighth, it's 52 and 3/8, it's 52. It's like I'm looking for the person I'm training to see 52 and a 16th, if that's what I'm seeing, 5 out of 5 times. You know what I mean? Like every time, because it is,
yes.
There is something to be said about learning to read the bend in the tape measure.
Oh, and, definitely, because that bend is not 100% precise.
Yes, it's not a like a crease. It's a little round bend.
Somebody should create a tape measure that has
creases.
Specific crease.
Oh goodness. Okay, so we have to be able to take our own measurements. Okay, the next thing is that we have to be able to fill out our work orders and our production orders with all the specifics. And the truth is, there's a step in between. Well, there's a step first, actually. You have to be able to come up with what the window treatment is, right? You have to have some, before we even measure for it, Vita, we have to say, is it going to be a Roman shade? Is it going to be a kick pleat valance? Is it going to be draperies? And then have an understanding of where that should be measured. Because, I just was at a home yesterday that all of the Roman shades were mounted in what I call an inside-outside mount.
Mm-hmm.
There was
inside outside mount. What do you mean by that?
Well, there was literally a 1/4 inch of inside clearance to mount a window treatment. And so whoever did the window treatments for this particular client 18 years ago installed the Roman shade, quote unquote, technically inside, but they
protruded out into the roof.
The headrail on the Roman shade is 2 1/4 inches. Mm-hmm. So it's technically sitting inside the window, but the gaps on the side are ridiculous because the fabric was falling off the front of the shade. And so it looks so silly. It's like when you have a size, 8 foot and you're walking around in a size 6 shoe. It's like, you're not kidding anybody. Just get an 8. You know what I'm saying? Like, stop with that. Right?
You're making a really good point that we kind of skipped over before the measurements even come into the picture. As with any kind of design project or design aspect of the project, when it comes to window treatments, of course, the designer has to have a vision, right? And has to have some sort of general idea of whether he or she is envisioning Roman shades or whether he or she is envisioning drapery panels. And are these drapery panels stationary or do they need to function? And so there's that overall design aesthetic vision, but there's also, and this is not to be overlooked, there needs to be as an additional step to the design vision, there needs to be an understanding of the practical functional needs.
Right.
And that usually comes from, quite frankly, just a real in-depth discussion with the client. What does the client need in that space? Is privacy an issue? Is light control an issue? Is glare on the TV an issue? Are there certain obstructions under the window, to the side of the window, that are an issue, and we need to be mindful of that? So do they need to have it be totally blackout in the bedroom, or some light is okay? I think, LuAnn, you have a very interesting distinction with your blackout.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I do. And the thing is, though, here's the thing, like, to not get lost in the weeds of all that, the idea and the big message is, this is on you. You don't have somebody to consult with this. Right? That's the whole point of it. You have to get the information out of your client. You have to figure out the goals for the client, with the client, and you have to figure out if what the client wants aesthetically and what you want aesthetically is functional and appropriate and can be done. And so when we work with our designers, Vita, they don't have that responsibility, right? They have, hey, I want it to look like this. I want it to do this. You let me know if it will work. But when you do it yourself, which you're 110% capable of, this is the first step, being able to actually come up with what the design is the design appropriate from a combination of aesthetics and function, and do you technically know where and how to measure given the circumstances of the room, whether there's crown molding, there's obstacles, there's stack back, all of that stuff. So that's one. Then two.
Perfectly summarized, actually.
Okay.
Really nice job.
Thank you. So that's one, actually. Two is, then you have to be qualified and capable of measuring. And so and again, go to these resources, the WCAA and Window Fashion Vision magazine, in order to find places to teach you how to do that. And then now we're to the third, which is, once you have, decided on the window treatment, you have decided on the, the fabrics, the products, whatever, you have to be able to fill out your work orders and your production orders with all of the specific information. So, and really you have to have already know how to calculate how many yards, right? Because sometimes a workroom will do that for you, but it's not their job. Not when you are coming to them as the DIY, not when you're coming to them as the interior designer who is handling his or her window treatment revenue stream as the owner of that, because there are different price structures at workrooms for designers who do window treatments. And the one price structure is this DIY price structure. The secondary price structure is you want us to measure, you want us to figure out your labor, you want us to figure out your yardage. So if you're doing this level DIY, you're also figuring out your yardage. And for complicated, unusual situations, of course, you can always go to your workroom and say, hey, double check me on this, or how do I figure this out? But that's the rare one-off situation, not the day-to-day, every single day, we're going to figure your yardage for you. It's like, no. See, this was your project, remember? Right?
Right. And so I would love, if that's okay with you, LuAnn, to go over some of the specifics that would have to be part of that work order to the workroom. Maybe not a comprehensive checklist, but some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head, actually. Okay, so and of course there's different things for different type of treatments. So why don't we take a drapery panel, since it's probably the most popular treatment right now. So if you're doing drapery panel for your workroom, you need to specify the following: face width of the panel, the size of the return, the size of the overlap, the length of the panel. So those are your specific measurements for the drapery panel. I also specify how many pairs it is, if it's usually they come in pairs, right? So if it is a pair, that you need to let them know that it's a right and left return, right and left overlap. If it's one panel, that you need to specify specifically. Does that work?
Right.
Specify specifically if it's a right or a left panel. Next, you have to tell them what kind of header you would like. Is it a pleated panel? And if it's a pleated, what kind of pleat do you want? And make sure that the lingo that you're using between you and the workroom is common. So it's the same thing. So when you're calling somebody something a triple French pinch pleat, you know exactly that the workroom is understanding exactly what you mean. Of course, pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Right, but let's understand something. It's the workroom's lingo that you use here. You can call it whatever you want, but if you're doing this at this level, Vita, if you call, I had one interior designer in New York one time that he came to me after he was in business probably 15 years, and now we still work together. It's 20 years later. But for his entire career, what he called a French pleat, we call a pinch pleat, and vice versa. And so the very first couple of times that we worked together, we kept saying, okay, your French pleat, my pinch pleat. And then finally he's like, okay, I'll do it your way. And I just said that to share that it is entirely possible that you call something and somebody else calls it something different. But in this situation, even me, if I call it a pinch pleat, but my workroom calls it a French pleat, it gets ordered as a French pleat. The workroom is the one who is doing the work. The workroom isn't the one who's going to look and say, oh, every time she says French pleat, she really means pinch pleat. It's like, you order what you want, because they're not thinking, they're executing.
Right.
You see, when the designer was working with me, it was my responsibility to consistently think and say, okay, do you mean French pleat, or are you finally talking pinch pleat like me? But the workroom has no responsibility. You check off pinch pleat, that's what you're getting. And when you want to know what pinch pleat is, go look at their reference guide. It's not what you think it is. Right, Vita?
Right. So, I agree with you and that statement 100%. I am personally in a slightly different model, so I always think.
Well, see, but you are usually, no, like we got to pick this apart now, because what you have to do is you are a half-breed model. You are not strictly a workroom, and you are not strictly a concierge retailer like me. You are the half-breed, and you are the unusual model. They're going to, designers are much more likely to run into, if they're going to do their own window treatments, they're much more likely to run into a workroom that simply takes orders. Okay.
Right. And I think for the purposes of our episode today, let's stick with the do-it-yourself, which is, to your point, the lingo has to be very specific. Yes. And when you check off a certain box that says a certain thing, then it is your responsibility, meaning the designer's responsibility, that it is what you actually want it to be.
Exactly.
Not anybody else's.
Right. We're not talking about hand-holding here. You hand-hold. I handhold. Right. We're not talking about that. And it's just like Hunter Douglas. If you place an order and you call it a duet, but it's what you're really looking at is a silhouette, but you as the do-it-yourself interior designer for window treatments place an order for a duet, guess what you're getting? You're getting a duet, and nobody cares. Oh, well, I thought this was a duet. Well, sorry, sweetie, it's not. So,
good point.
All right.
Yep,
and I'm a little uncomfortable with the do-it-yourself moniker, because I don't want anybody to confuse. We're talking about custom window treatments. We just mean it in the sense that you as an interior designer are placing your complete, you are going to take all the risk and make all the money. And that's the good and the bad of it. So, okay.
Right. So we're still talking in the realm of, you are going to be using a custom drapery workroom, or you could be using, if it's for hard treatments, you could be using a custom window treatment fabricator, be that Hunter Douglas or somebody else for shades, blinds, and so forth. Right. And to LuAnn's point, is just the ordering process and the specifying process and the measuring process and the installation process largely lies and rests with you, and that responsibility rests with you, the designer who chose to do it themselves.
Well, and here's a perfect example. If a designer wants a Camelback sofa, But in their mind, they picture, I mean, I know this is absurd to say out loud because it's not as nearly as gray. But what if, you have a tuxedo style sofa and you have a Camelback sofa? Let's just say there's a world where a designer would say, oh, see that picture there? I call that a tuxedo style sofa. But the rest of us are like, that's a Camelback, sweetie. Like, you don't get to order with Kravit or any other custom furniture company the tuxedo and think the Camelback is coming. And when the tuxedo comes and you say, hey, this is what I think is a tuxedo, and you show them a Camelback, they don't go, oh, no problem. We thought, that's what we call a Camelback. Here, have one Camelback. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? It's like,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
okay,
yes. No,
okay.
no, definitely. Point well taken.
Okay.
That lingo, the language. I mean, everybody has to speak the common language. And the point that even the additional point that you are making, LuAnn, that common language doesn't become a designer's language.
Right.
It is truly the workroom's language that the designer is really needing to learn so that it becomes a common language for her or him.
Right, exactly. 100%. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So to just go through the rest of the points fairly quickly. What else? Where we were 5 minutes ago was on a checklist of the things that you need to present to your workroom. And we talked about the dimensions of the panel. We talked about the header of the panel. Then next comes what kind of fullness you want that panel to be. How many widths of fabric does it take, or how many yards if it's white goods? What kind of lining do you want? Also, usually specified, if different than standard, are the double side hems, the double bottom hem. Do you want any kind of chain weights in the corners, or do you want the whole beaded chain weight throughout the bottom hem? If there's any kind of banding on the panel, which is very popular nowadays, whether it's a vertical band along the leading edge, whether it's a band all around, whether it's a 3 rows of banding across, exactly what kind of banding it is, where it needs to be placed, how far from the edge, how far apart from each other, all of that kind of detail needs to be specified.
Right.
Okay. And just actually even going through my order here.
Pin setting.
Then I don't do, what do you, I mean, I know what pin setting is, but how do you specify it for your workroom?
Well, we have to say that if we want it for deco rod, non-deco rod, we have to say what pin setting we want, because they're going to put the drapery pins in, and it makes the installer's life so much easier if you don't put it the wrong way every time, LuAnn. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. So what you're used to in your business is that your workroom puts the pins in.
Yes.
Interesting. Some workrooms do that. There is a different train of thought or school of thought on that, is that there's a higher likelihood of the pins potentially ripping the fabric when it's being taken out of the plastic. I don't know. It may or may not be true. I don't know. We've always
had our pins, put in at the workroom, and I've never had a rip from a pin. Yeah.
I understand.
Well, it has to be packaged right?
Yeah, for me, my installer does it. I know a lot of installers who do it themselves as well, so it can be either or. But yeah, another good point. Do you want pins or do you not want pins? If you want pins, where do you want it?
Yeah, it saves a ton of time on the install if you specify the pin setting and you also specify the right pin setting. That part saves time. Okay. All righty.
That's what I have as far as our checklist for in terms of the work orders, production orders that the designer needs to have for the workroom.
Exactly. And by contrast, a designer doesn't have to have any of this when they work with a concierge level service. So, but all of these are the responsibility of the designer. Okay. Now, next things you are responsible for, as we said a moment ago, of calculating your yardage and ordering the yardage and having it properly drop shipped, or if you check it first and then reship it and send it to the workroom. But you're responsible for it being marked properly. If I had a nickel for every package that I get with no marking on it, I would not have to be doing this podcast or window treatments.
I know it is quite frustrating when the packages are not marked with the side mark the way you want it to be. And sometimes it's not the designer's fault. Sometimes they give the side mark, not blaming anyone, but it's just the way the vendor does it. But to your point, proper marking on the package and on the packing list is really, really important.
Exactly. And then from that point, you're going to place your order, get your fabric over there, and now it's your job to babysit that order. It's your job to consistently check in, because what's going to happen now is when you are responsible for this entire thing, for example, if you send your work order over, you send your drapery fabric over, you have all of your information there, and there is supposed to be a contrast trim or banding on the drape. You've ordered it, but if it doesn't get received by the workroom, they're not going to call you and tell you. It can sit there for 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years until you have really established a very high-level relationship with a workroom. It is unlikely that they are going to reach out and tell you that you're missing components of your order. I would say before 1 month to 2 months. Some will go longer, but it's not like no one's going to say to you, hey, we got your work order Tuesday, we got your fabric on Wednesday, and where's your trim? It's Thursday. No, it's not going to happen. It's up to you to do that and to track it, because you've all been there. You've placed an order, you've initiated your purchase order, and you've got it sitting on your desk, and you have that feeling of it's been done, but 2 weeks later, you actually didn't send the check in, or you didn't authorize the credit card payment, and the trim wasn't ordered. And this is why I've told you guys 1,000 times that Window Works does Status Tuesday. Every single thing that we have ordered gets checked on Tuesday. Did the trim get there? Did the fabric get there? Were the blinds ordered? Was the hardware ordered? Blah, 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 blah. And there's actual verification on every one of these items, because it's easy to forget things.
Just listening to you, LuAnn, just gave me such I could feel my temperature rise a little bit.
It's the truth.
Stress of it,
it's a
the
lot.
Responsibility of it, and it really is not to be overlooked. Everything you just said, because everything in this business, everything is in the details. Mm-hmm. That's kind of number one. And number two is you should never assume anything. Not a thing, not a period, not a symbol, nothing. Nothing is to be assumed. And just because, let's take your example of you ordered the fabric, you shipped it to the workroom, you ordered the trim, you shipped it to the workroom, you send them the work order, and you're like, boom, 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 done. I'm good. Just because you've shipped it, you think it's there, it doesn't mean that it's there. It
right.
really is all about you having to follow up and make sure that all the components of the work order are at the workroom. Then you either meet in person if it's local, or somehow you have your other process if it's not local, to make sure that the workroom has everything that you've specified and that they have no questions about your work order, and then they're ready to go. Because otherwise, so many things can fall through the cracks. It's not even funny.
Right. Well, the thing about it is that the way the process is typically going to go, once the workroom receives everything that has to do with an order, they're going to send you a confirmation, and they're going to say, XYZ fabric trim work order received for side mark Sally Smith. And until you get that, until you confirm that you've gotten that, nothing's happening. Nothing is happening. It's not happening. And they could have an online system. I know with the workrooms that we use, we can go into the online system and we could see status of the order. And the thing is, there could be, like Adriana will go in on Tuesday, and there's different highlighting for orders that have everything they need and orders that are awaiting information or product. And then she can go in and it'll say trim isn't here, or work order isn't complete, or work order not received. It's 1,000 things, but they're basically, and that's only in the recent years. Back in the day, in the dark ages, you know what I mean? When I first came up, honestly, there was no fax, there was no it was only telephone, there was no computer. And
all right, LuAnn.
Yeah, but I mean, if you didn't have your stuff in, they didn't care. Now at least they're keeping their own internal system, and because of the way computers are now, they're basically allowing you into their CRM tool. That's basically what's happening. We're in their order function tool. And so you usually can see it in real time the way they can see it. It's like missing items or unconfirmed items, questions unanswered. And so that's what one of the tools that Adriana will use. She will go in first there. And if everything there is received at the workroom end, then she doesn't have to call Kravit, and she doesn't have to call Stallion, out to say if the fabric or the trim shipped, right? But it's when she gets that information and she's like, oh, or sometimes it's like, emailed LuAnn question on, such and such date, waiting answer. And then she'll be like, oh, okay, where's Lou? Why didn't she answer this? You know what I'm saying?
And I also want to highlight a slightly different type of workroom, where it's also for the interior designer. It's also the do-it-yourself type of model, where the designer has the direct interaction with the workroom. But the workroom may not be as big and sophisticated as what LuAnn is saying here. The workroom that I would be referring to is, let's say, it could have maybe 5 people, 6 people, 3 people. It could even be a one person working out of her lower level studio, is what it's called nowadays, meaning the basement. So, and of course, there's no CRM system. It's everything's on paper, and there's various levels of customer support there. There's also various levels of conscientiousness and various levels of just plain organization. And that's not to say that somebody is better than the other. It's just we all have our, in LuAnn's words, superpowers, and different workrooms have different levels of that type of service. And so the point that I'm trying to make, and is building on LuAnn's too, is that whichever type of workroom you're using, again, still within that do-it-yourself model, that responsibility lies with you to check, to track, to follow up, to make sure that all of the components of the order are indeed at the workroom, that they're correctly received, and that everything is ready for that drapery panel to begin the fabrication process.
Exactly. We have a couple of small local workrooms like that we work with. I know what you're talking about, that we send some of the items that are whatever. But here's what I'm telling you about that. To your point, exactly, is now when you are dealing with a smaller workroom style like that, now you are actually dealing with the culture of that workroom. And it's going to start with the owner.
Yes.
Right. It's going to start with the owner. If the owner is of like you, Vita, completely buttoned up with all types of spreadsheets and everything is locked down.
Me? Spreadsheets?
Yes. You can be sure that if you were to call up and you had, Status Tuesday and said, I just want to double check and, have a conversation about where we are in the process, I'm sure that your personality workroom owner would be able to quickly access that information. But if I were ever a workroom owner, no, not if I was responsible for it. But like, I don't know, I think it's here. No. So, but the point is that I have one of our workrooms that we use. There are 5 good reasons that we use them, and there's 3 things about them that I don't like. But the 5 that are good outweigh the 3 that I don't like. But it is my responsibility to do an end work around those 3. Their culture is never going to change. And so what I know, and we've adapted in our thing is with this little workroom is, every time we send a work order, we do 2 things. We tell them that what we're ordering from you is part of a greater project, and I expect completion and delivery to be XYZ date. So if I'm ordering it on August 1st, and maybe I'm ordering cornices from this workroom, but I'm also ordering draperies from my other workroom, I'm ordering hard treatments from Comfortex, I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I will say, this is part of a bigger project. I expect delivery to schedule delivery September 15th-ish. And they know, because otherwise, if I just put it out there, and I just say, here's the 2 orders for cornices, he's going to assume it's part of a big order, and he will not put it on his schedule. So if I really only want 2 cornices made and I have nothing else, I will say 2 cornices, XYZ style, here's all the information. This is the only items ordered for this client. Please advise when you will put it on your workroom schedule. You see, I have to prompt him like that because he is an expert craftsman and has 1,000 other things that are good, but he sort of schedules by fire. You see? You see? You see what I'm saying? Sort of by who's in his face, and sort of by the how big the job is and what he can handle at the workroom. And so instead of me, and what I've taught my staff is, instead of saying to him, instead of us being like, it always takes too long to get this, let's tell them we need everything in 3 weeks. My tactic is, let's be truthful. Let's say I don't need this for 8 weeks. I don't need this for 4 weeks. I don't need this for 6 weeks. I'd love to have this in 10 days if you could. Because then when I really want it in 10 days, I'm much more likely to get it. Because I don't do the boy who cries wolf with everyone. But this is a nuance of working with a smaller workroom like this. His culture and his level of organization in this regard, I have to understand his idiosyncrasy. Whereas if you work with a bigger workroom, it's going to come in and go in on schedule. As soon as everything that you have is been here, the date is marked in the sand and the clock begins, and now we start to work on your order, and you can expect it to come out in 4 to 6 weeks like clockwork. Right. And
very interesting. Yes. The way you've just broken down the two different cultures, and that would probably like maybe not even 1 or 5% of all the types of culture, not types, but just the different cultures and personalities of workrooms out there. That was really powerful. And I think the point that I would like to extrapolate from that is probably a repeat of what we said, but to reinforce that when the designer selects the workroom to work with within that do-it-yourself model, he or she needs to be very aware of what that personality or culture is, decide if he or she wants to adapt to that culture, right? You may decide not to, you may decide to look for somebody else. But if you have decided that, to your point, LuAnn, that the benefits outweigh the negatives, then you have to work within that culture. Like, you have to work within that personality. You have to know what they expect. You have to know how they work, and the way you communicate with them and treat them, and the expectations that you have for them would have to be within what they are willing and capable of giving back.
Right. You're not going to change somebody's business. It's as simple as that. You're just not. You either agree to work within and around it, or you don't have to. There's another workroom out there. And it's no different than a potential client coming to you as an interior designer. So you might be the interior designer that gives a status report every Friday. You might be the interior designer that gives one once a month. You might be the interior designer that won't text, that will text. The point is that you're deciding how you run your business, and the potential clients are deciding if they like that model and if they can fit in it and be happy in it. And it's the same with this. There are 1,000 variables when working with a small workroom, and you just have to find your fit. And I just want to say, too, we have 2 other points to take care of with the checklist. And then I want to have just a tiny bit of discussion on finding and vetting that workroom. But let's continue. So the next part is, right?
Before we move to the next part, it's something that we mentioned ever so briefly, but in speaking to all the various designers in the last couple of months, I know that's a really, really big topic for them, as well as the workrooms that have to deal with it, and that is the selection of proper fabrics.
Oh, okay, right.
And so I think that this whole topic may warrant its separate episode altogether. But what I would like to say now is for this episode is that designer, if you are selecting the fabric, when you fall in love with that fabric, when the customer falls in love with that fabric, and you're working within that do-it-yourself model, please be sure that the fabric is appropriate to the treatment that you're selecting.
Right. Because here's the other thing, too. Unless it's completely undoable, the workroom is not going to perform this function for you. The workroom is, if you pick a fabric with your client and you send it to the workroom and you say make a Roman shade out of it, unless it's not capable of being made, at this level of doing window treatments, you're very unlikely to get a phone call that says, hey, just wanted to tell you, I don't think this is a great fabric for this treatment. And the fact of the matter is to Vita's point, even if your workroom is going to do that, okay, you've already bought the fabric. It's yours. Now you have to have a restocking fee and everything else. This is not you're not getting the ability to get the opinion on this before you purchase. This is part of your scope and your responsibility in doing it the DIY way. Okay.
And I can even offer even a slightly different or an additional nuance to that. You're in particular talking about the big track workrooms that will get the fabric, make it happen unless it's completely unworkable, undoable. But let me say a word for those lower level workrooms, lower level type workrooms.
Smaller, they're not lower level, right? Small, just small. They're not lower level quality, just smaller operations.
I'm sorry. Of course. It's just within the workroom industry, there's just a slight self-deprecating humor about working in a lower level studio. That's all I meant, you guys.
That's just smaller operation.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yes. So for like smaller workrooms, 1 person, 2 people, 3 people.
1-to-1 service. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, they will receive that fabric. They will know right away that it's not the appropriate fabric for that treatment, and they will most likely call the designer and have the conversation, except that, to your point, LuAnn, at that point, the fabric has been purchased. Mm-hmm. All the bills have been paid.
Yep.
The client loves the fabric. The designer loves the fabric. And most likely what's going to happen, the designer will kind of force the workroom's hand in making it happen. I know it's not, I know you don't think it's going to work, but let's just make it happen. Let's just mitigate it somehow. We could do the heavier weights, and maybe we can train the pleats a little bit. Maybe we can put some tacks in. Maybe you can steam the heck out of it and it will work.
Right.
And, the workrooms, they want to please the designer, right? They want to please the customer. They want to make it happen. In the end, it will most likely not look the way the designer is expecting it, and then everybody is left with that sort of icky feeling that the project didn't quite go the way they all wanted to, and whose fault is that?
It is the designer's fault at that point. It's 100%. If you push it through, it's your fault. Period. That's it.
I'm nodding my head. Yes.
Yeah. Whether the workroom has advised you or not, whether the workroom has advised you and you push them back, ultimately everything about this model is that it ends with your responsibility. Period. So that's the thing.
And another point I want to make, just moving off of the fabrics, but onto another thing that the designers need to specify for window treatments is the hardware. You need to decide what kind of hardware you want, who are you purchasing it from. You need to decide how many rings, how many brackets, how many rods, any kind of additional components to make it happen, whether it calls for a splice, or it calls for a specific return, or it calls for a specific type of bracket, or it calls for a finial plug, or any kind of other components they seem so small and insignificant, but they can make or break your installation. All of that is the responsibility of the designer. Oh, and by the way, speaking of hardware, when you calculate the length of the drapery, you have to be able to figure out what is called a bracket deduction, which means that the drapery is not the length of the wall, floor to ceiling. It is the length of the wall minus the drapery deduction minus the floor clearance. And you have to know what that means and how to calculate it.
And here's the fun part of that. Every single rod on the planet
is different.
Has a different deduction. It does. It absolutely does. It's the most brutal thing. And I'm going to tell you what, we almost every Monday in our weekly meetings, it's Kim and me looking at Billy going, okay, this is the rod, this is the measurement, what's the deduction? Now there's certain go-to rods that we use, and we just have recorded that in the manuals for those rods. Ceiling mount, deduct XYZ, wall mount, deduct XYZ, yada, yada. But, I must have 25 catalogs for drapery hardware.
Yeah.
25. Yeah. And every single one of them has various brackets and various connections and various size poles and various ring size and carrier size. And every single one of those things requires a specific individual deduction be made, so that when you know what your quote-unquote window treatment length is, you know what the drapery length is that you're ordering, or valance length that you're ordering. It's not for the meek of heart. And then just placing the order is brutal. Let's just go there. Let's not, actually. Let's just not go there.
Yeah, let's not. No. That could be a separate episode altogether as well.
Yeah. This is, what, I'm just realizing how negative I'm sounding on this whole thing. And this is actually why it's called WTF. I mean, I love my business and I'm so grateful for it, but whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. And then the last thing is that, not the last, but the last checklist item is that you do have to that now not only take care of getting your treatments out of whatever workroom you're using, and if it's a smaller type workroom, you might have to go over there with your check or send your check, or maybe they deliver, whatever it is. And now you have to communicate with whatever installer you're hiring to get this project done. You have to set up this installation between these the homeowner and your installer. And the thing about it is that now you have a whole nother level of communication and work order, quote unquote, work order that you have to create. The work order that you create for your workroom, for the product specifics, is often not enough information for your installer. So for Window Works, we always include the workroom work order for our installer on the install. But there is a whole nother level of communication that has to happen with the nuance of the install, that it is, your responsibility so that the installer knows what to expect on the installation.
You know what? I cannot wait till our next episode, because I am just like jumping out of my skin to share how I do it. But my business model is completely different. So I don't want to muddle the waters. But there's definitely a very succinct and efficient way to get it done. And I can't wait to share that.
Yeah. No, it's good. We'll do that next time. That's awesome. So, but here's the thing. So, Vita, ultimately, we discussed this in our first episode. This is not to steer you off the decision to lean into window treatments as a business model where you take ownership of it. Look, you and I both make a nice living on this, and I am the first person that wants to share any way to make money with anybody who's interested in understanding and learning and doing the work. So, and I've had conversations recently with a couple of people. Jessica Cooley comes to mind. There's a couple of people that come to mind that are saying, I'm an interior designer and I'm thinking about actually just leaning in and specializing in window treatments and using that as the calling card. And if 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 clients wants to convert and do some design work, great. But what do you think about me just doing window treatments? And here's what I think about it. If you have a desire and you want to do it, I think it's a great idea. It has supported 4 kids, a house, 4 college educations. It's an awesome business. You know what I'm saying? So, but you do need to get your information and lock it down. And here's what happens. When you do it this way, you not only, as we've just scared the heebie-jeebies out of you by showing you all of the details and the responsibility that you take, but you share in more of the profits, because there's nobody in between you and the workroom like there is. If I do all these details for you, I get paid to do them for you. You make some money, I make some money, the client pays for all of it. That's how it works, right? But if you want to do all these details and you have the bandwidth, or you're thinking of switching into, and as I said, specializing it and sort of just doing design as the side extra, then yes, it's a viable business and you can make a lot of money. And the thing, Vita, is how do you do it, right? So if we're sitting here and somebody is like, yes, I'm like Jessica, I'm thinking of doing this, or I just want to add this. How do I find the workrooms? How do I do it, right? So, of course, I'm constantly mentioning the WCAA and IWCE and Window Fashion Vision magazine. But beyond that, isn't it in your mind, it's getting to know them. It's like finding a pediatrician. You just don't take the first one. Right?
Correct. Just like anything else, just like any kind of relationship, right? You don't just jump in full force, full throttle, you give them all your business and you just forget about it. Just like any relationship, you dip your toe in, you talk to them, you try to understand their culture and their personality, you try to understand their processes. Also, I would try to understand their vision for their business and their mission, and how do they look at their business in the context of even their life altogether. Not to get sort of philosophical about this, but I'm sort of at the point of my life where I want to work with people that are aligned with me in their values. I mean, they may be working off of the most beautiful spreadsheets, which I will totally geek out on, but but if they're not aligned with me on that deeper level, I will think twice about it. And part of the reason for that is because if you do decide to do window treatments, be that just part of your interior design offering, or like LuAnn just said, if it becomes your specialty, I mean, you are in a marriage with this workroom.
Right.
I mean, it is like a work husband or a work wife.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking to them all the time. You are dealing with them all the time. And, there's enough to be said for all the details and dealings when things are great. LuAnn, we haven't even touched on the aspect of what if something goes wrong?
No.
Who's responsible and how do we resolve it? And I mean, that's probably another topic in and of itself. My goodness, my list keeps growing.
I know, right?
Hey, listen, we thought that this was going to be like a 30-minute episode, and here we are, right? But there's a lot to be said.
Well, and the other thing too is to just give you hope is as much as I have said you have to come to the table with all the information and that it has to be accurate and on the terms of the workroom, and all of that is true. There's no question it is true. But that doesn't mean the conversation can't be started with, hi, I'm an interior designer. I'm thinking of adding window treatments as a specialty part of my business, and I would like to learn this aspect and specify, order, and install window treatments. Would you be a partner with me? Would you help me? So you can say that to a workroom because like I said, some workrooms have different pricing structures set up for the different levels that you come to them with completeness. They also have just some just have a straight off ladder of services. So, you're a designer A and you just need fabrication. You're capable of providing all of the work orders, blah, 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 but you don't need measure and install. Designer B uses our measurer, our installer, and our fabrication. So the point is, don't be intimidated to ask, and don't be intimidated to share that it's new. The best thing you can do is, if it's new for you, is to tell them that it's new for you, rather than pretending that you know it, because it's 99% of the people on this planet are going to want to help you grow your business, especially if in growing your business grows their own business. So just being up front and saying, I might need some hand-holding for the first 5 or 6 projects, but my intention is to grow beyond that and handle more of this on myself and be a true partner that comes to you with a completed product. But in the beginning, do you mind? And that's where we talked about culture. Some would be like, I'm sorry, that's not happening. And you just move on.
Right. Or it just doesn't fit their business model. They're too busy. They don't have enough time, bandwidth, desire, or everything else to deal with the newbies.
And let's be serious. Very few are going to look at you and tell you, I don't have this availability in my business model. They'll say yes, but then not deliver anything that you need. Right? I mean, look, how many people look straight at the eye and say, no, that's not what I'm going to do for you. They'll be like, oh, yeah, it's okay. But then your question takes 3 days to answer, blah, 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 blah. And so what I'm saying is, and that was to the point of culture, if you start on the same foot and you ask for the teaching, learning, mentoring process, and they say yes, but in reality, you're not getting it, go find another one. Go find another one. Go try it somewhere else. Okay. So because it does become down to what they're capable and what they're interested in doing. But my experience is most people aren't clear on it themselves and therefore won't say yes or no directly. So,
that was a lot.
It is. So, all right. So I think the points were made. What we're going to do now for the next episode is we are going to talk about the business model number 2, where you work with a window treatment specialist. And, Vita is calling it a project management company. I like that. I always call it concierge level services. Means the same thing. Means that we do all of these details for you so that you can stick to your superpower of interior designing. However, you do still have responsibilities within Business Model 2, and we're going to go through that in the next episode, right, Vita?
I cannot wait.
Exactly.
I did. Seriously. I mean, I don't just feel I cannot wait.
I love it. Okay. In the meantime, guys, we definitely do appreciate the emails and the suggestions and the messages that you've been sending us with topics that you want covered. So please keep them coming. I would remind you, come to WindowWorks if you're in the area on the September 23rd. Come to Pennsylvania on September 24th. And a big, huge shout out to Stout. A thank you for hosting us and putting this together. If you're not familiar with Stout, you can look into Stout at estout.com, and you can look into signing up for your trade account. And they have, I love the culture at Stout. Speaking of culture, Vita, it is a family-owned business. They remind me a lot like Kravit in this regard. It's a family-owned business. My rep, Bart, in the New Jersey area is one of, I would tell you, again, I reserve this for certain people, but top 5 fabric reps I've ever had. Yes, really, really has intentionally paid attention to our account, and therefore he has been rewarded by our sales with him going up year after year after year. But I remember him coming in the very first time, and I'm telling him my ground rules for sales reps, and I just said, these are my ground rules. Play by them or die by them. Basically, I don't care because I don't care about you yet. And
oh my God, sounds like another topic. I just can't help myself. I think we're out to like 2022 with the topics.
It's the truth, but it is the way I do it at WindowWorks because I respect the profession of sales so much that if you think you're going to sell to me, you must do it the way I know a salesman should perform. And when you don't, I don't care. But Bart, he looked right. I meant forget him. I think I scared the heebie-jeebies out of him. He looked right at me and he said, "I can do that." I said, "Well, we'll see if you can or not."
Oh boy,
and
you're
he
tough
did.
cookie when it comes to sales.
There are some things I am, right? But he did, and made such an impression. Always continues to make the impression and always continues to deliver and be an amazing partner to us with the Stout Company. So huge shout out to them. And I'm looking forward to meeting the team and the staff at Design Trade Resource. So I'll probably be singing their praises soon after. Anyway, Vita, thank you.
Bunch,
yes, I'm sure that if you like them, I know I'm going to like them. So.
They're terrific. It's going to be a great event. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Not to be overlooked the fact that it's 1.5 CEUs. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a delicious lunch served because Becky is the owner of Design Trade Resources, and she never disappoints. And LuAnn, last but not least, there's going to be a book signing by you. So anyone who comes and attends will also receive a copy of the book signed by LuAnn.
That's it. So looking forward to seeing you guys. Thank you so much for the feedback on WTF, or you can tell that we're having a great time bringing it to you. And we're just going to end the day like we always do. What is your action item? What is the thing that you're going to do? Do you need to call a workroom? Do you need to start a relationship? Do you need to look into courses? Do you need to start to get the Window Fashion Vision magazine? Do you need to join the WCAA? I don't know. What is the thing that you're going to do? But do it well, do it your best, and decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.